Hi, I'm Brian E. Denton, author of the book A Year of War and Peace in the poetry collection Spiration. Welcome to my channel. This video is part of a series I'm doing that is a reader's guide to Dante's Divine Comedy, all three books, the Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. You can find the playlist to the Inferno down in the show notes below. You'll also find a link in the show notes to Baylor University's 100 Days of Dante project. The 100 Days of Dante project is the inspiration for this reader's guide that I'm producing. It's very high quality stuff. You're going to like it, so go ahead and click through on that. If you're a new viewer, I'd ask you to please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. We're trying to get to 275 subscribers by the end of the month. That's January 2022. And we're currently at 270 something, so I'm fairly certain we can get there, especially with your help. So thanks in advance for that. Also, for new viewers, I just want to let you know that these videos will follow a certain format. You're going to find this introduction, which we're doing right now. This will be followed by a synopsis of the Canto under discussion. After that, there's a characters and themes section where we go over the characters and the themes. And after that, there's a takeaway section where I offer my own personal analysis of the Canto and how we can use the Canto to live better lives ourselves. After that, there's an outro where I just wrap everything up. And then when that's done, you just go wherever the YouTube algorithm takes you. So with all that, let's jump right into it. Today's canto is Dante's Purgatorio, Canto 9. Dante opens up things today by trying to situate the reader temporally, and he fails miserably. I mean, after he's done, if we can somehow penetrate through the dense fog of his poetry in these opening lines, we come to understand that it's either moonrise in purgatory or morning in Italy. We just don't know. Concision and clarity, apparently, are not the greatest poet of all time's strong suit. Do better, Dante. After these confusing lines, Dante the poet has Dante the pilgrim do what all heroes of epic poetry do: fall asleep. And in this sleep, Dante has what turns out to be the first of his purgatorial dreams. He dreams that a giant, soaring, golden-feathered eagle swoops him up in his taloned claws and then drops him into a pit of searing fire. The fire is so searing, in fact, that Dante the pilgrim immediately leaps up out of his slumber in startled fear. Dante wakes up to find himself alone with Virgil, and more importantly, in a changed position. That is, he is no longer in the Valley of the Negligent Princes where he fell asleep. He's now at the very gates of purgatory. And Virgil explains what's going on. Virgil tells Dante that he has been brought here to the gates of purgatory by none other than Saint Lucy. And after this is all explained, Virgil then leads Dante up to the gates of purgatory. And here Dante the poet stops things. And the reason he stops things is because he wants to take a few moments to tell his readers that what they're about to read is some of the most majestic and beautiful poetry ever produced. I love this guy. Not even a rapper is more confident in his rhymes. What we get next then, what closes out the canto in fact, is a description of the gate of purgatory. This is very good stuff here, very dense. Basically, we see the gate of purgatory that is above three separate steps. And on the top step stands the gatekeeper of purgatory. And this gatekeeper issues a warning to Virgil and Dante. The two poet pilgrims ask for admittance into purgatory, and Dante beats on his chest 3 times as he's asking this. And when he approaches, the gatekeeper writes 7 P's on his forehead. That's the letter P, not the vegetable. After this, we get a better description of the gatekeeper, and then he explains the meanings of the 2 keys that he holds in his hand. One is of gold, and one is of silver. He tells them basically that the gates to purgatory will not open unless one of these keys opens it. Lucky for our 2 poet pilgrim heroes, the gates open, but before they enter, the gatekeeper once again offers them a warning. And that warning is this: once you step inside of purgatory, you cannot look back into anti-purgatory. And if you do, you'll have to return outside again and wait. The doors screech open. And this troublesome noise is followed by the sweet sounds of the Te Deum Laudamus. And that's where we end. It's true that Dante frequently boasts that he's the greatest poet of all time, but like Juvenile's girl, he can really back it up. He certainly does so today. This canto is a veritable cornucopia of poetry filled with aesthetic beauty and moral instruction. It's hard to know where to begin, this canto is so rich, but I've identified two things which I think will help us understand what's going on in this canto. First, there is the theme, already introduced in previous cantos, and that we'll explore further on actually, of the inherent difficulty involved in the purgatorial process. Then after that, we'll discuss Dante's dream. Let's get to it. We've already been introduced to the idea that the purgatorial process is very difficult. First of all, it entails climbing a mountain. That doesn't seem to be too easy. I mean, I wouldn't know though, because the only mountains I climb are the mountains of questions my wife has for me during movie night about every single plot and character. Aside from the scale of the trek up the mountain, there's also those repentant sinners we've encountered in Antipurgatory. And this shows difficulty too, because it's not only difficult to climb the mountain once you get into Purgatory, but it's very difficult to get into Purgatory proper just to begin with. There's lots of waiting involved. No one likes waiting. In fact, today, speaking of the difficulty of getting to Purgatory, we learned that Dante the Pilgrim couldn't even get there on his own. Remember that he had to rely on the help of Saint Lucy to get him to the gates of Purgatory. I really like this because it shows the benefits of having a worthy role model in life. That is, it's only by Lucy's help that Dante is able to arrive at the gates of Purgatory. Dante, the poet, I think, is suggesting that by contemplating the saints and modeling our behavior after their own, this is how we can set ourselves on the path to Purgatory and on the path to proper spiritual growth. Also note that Saint Lucy is the patron saint of writers, so we can also read this passage as suggesting that she has helped Dante the poet write these very lines, and that might be why they're so beautiful indeed, at least according to Dante himself, or probably according to all of us now that we've read them. They are quite beautiful, even if we're not reading them in the Italian. I like the English translations I read. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Now, aside from the difficulty of the task of climbing the mountain, there is also the size of the gate of Purgatory to consider as well. Let's contrast it with the entrance to hell. First, the gate of hell was wide open. And in fact, there wasn't a gate at all. It was just a wide open entrance. Anyone could walk through at any time. It was very easy. The gate to Purgatory, on the other hand, is very difficult to get through. As the gatekeeper reminds us, there are two keys, and this gate will not open unless one of the two keys opens it. So not everyone's getting into Purgatory. Everyone's welcome in hell, however. There's also the fact that in Purgatory, the path is narrow. Again, contrast this with the open wide entrance to hell. Dante describes this narrow opening of Purgatory as appearing at first and at a distance to be just a sliver of a crack in the wall. The meaning behind all this should be obvious. It's easy to sin and to enter hell. Much more difficult to get into heaven. It takes all of the human faculties working at a very high level to get into heaven. Allegorically speaking, we can say that we need both our reason and our spiritual pistons firing to charge up that mountain. I say that because it's Lucy who brought us here, and she represents our spiritual side, or God's grace. But it's also, note in lines 106 through 108, Virgil who leads Dante up the stairs that St. Lucy takes Dante to. Remember, it's Virgil that represents human reason. And this is a callback to previous thematic discussions we've had where we determined that we must use our reason to curb in our more base instincts. The difficulty in lifting our spiritual and reasoning powers to the highest degree so that we can enter Purgatory is represented quite beautifully, I think, in the sound that we hear the gates make as they open. Remember that they screech open. It's as if they have not been used for decades, right? So Dante once again is trying to indicate that it's very difficult to get into Purgatory. Let's now move on to the dream that Dante the Pilgrim has, because I believe that this dream really does support the idea that in order to climb the mountain of Purgatory, we must not only be in control of our spiritual selves, but also in control of our reasoning faculties. The dream is simple. A golden feathered eagle lifts Dante up and drops him into a fire. Now, this dream frightens Dante. He jumps up in fright back to conscious reality. But I don't think that we should read the fire as something nefarious. Just the opposite, actually. Fire here, I believe, is beneficent, godly light. After all, spoiler alert, when Dante finally arrives in paradise, when he enters the Empyrean, God's abode, his heavenly throne, we're going to find here that it's filled with light. And important for our discussion here, Dante will look upon the geometric image here meant to represent the Trinity. This image is 3 circles, 2 representing Father and the Son, and the third, looking like a fire, representing the Holy Spirit. So the fire the golden eagle drops Dante the pilgrim into is the fire of the Holy Spirit. And just as the eagle drops him into that fire, so Lucy has brought him to the first steps of purgatory. Here's what John S. Carroll has to say about this passage and its meaning. The whole incident is intended to show also that the divine grace can penetrate far deeper than our own conscious life and efforts. When the active powers are laid asleep, and the guidance of reason is in abeyance, and all the ordinary means of grace fall away from the soul, even then God keeps the pathway open for the feet of his messengers. So he giveth his beloved in sleep. One momentary flash of the fire in a vision of the night may sometimes accomplish more for the soul than struggling hours of its own climbing and outrun reason's slower pace. Virgil himself gladly yields place to Lucia, that's St. Lucy, the divine grace of the dream, content to follow humbly in her footprints, and to learn from her beauteous eyes the opening in the rocky rampart which lies between the soul and the next stage of the new life. St. Lucy's eyes are probably the demonstrations of truth, which grace carries intuitively to the reason, and they were beautiful because she had plucked them out in order to remain pure. For today's takeaway, what I'd like to do is leave you all with some passages concerning the hard work of moral living. It isn't easy. Today we compared and contrasted the easy, wide-open door of hell with the narrow, difficult door of purgatory. If we're to get into that difficult door, it's going to take some moral muscle. It's going to be relentless. When you relax your attention for a while, do not fancy that you will recover it whenever you please. But remember this, that because of your fault today, your affairs must necessarily be in a worse condition on future occasions. Continue in prayer, and watch in the same with thanksgiving. All right, that concludes my video, my reader's guide to Canto 9 of Dante's Purgatorio. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Remember that we're trying to get up to 275 subscriptions by the end of January. It's totally doable. I think we're at 270 something right now anyway. So with your help, we're certain to get there. Thanks in advance for that. More important than getting likes for the video or subscriptions for the channel, though, is getting a conversation going down in the comments below. This is kind of, after all, a little bit of a book club for Dante's Divine Comedy. So let me know what you think of this canto. Let me know what you think of the poem in general. I'm very curious to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I just want to let you know that we've moved off of the schedule of 100 Days of Dante, and I'm going to be releasing these videos now as often as I can. Hopefully 2 to 3 episodes a week. I hope that doesn't dissuade you from continuing with me on this journey up to paradise, and I invite you to the next video, which shall be coming out shortly. Until then, take care of yourselves and others. The fire is so fearing, in fact, fearing.